Hey there, how's it going? My name is David and you're watching Kai City RC. Thank you for stopping by. Okay, today's RC Garage update is going to be a post-track day, post-race event report. Yesterday I spent the entire day down at Carnosa RC Park. I started off doing shakedown run with the TT-02B. That went very well. Later I did some practicing with the Yokomo YZ2 and then finally got some practice timing with the Grasshopper. Yesterday's race meeting didn't start until 7 p.m. so finished quite late last night, but I had a wonderful time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some race footage, so if you're interested to learn what it was like to race grasshoppers on an indoor circuit, stick around and stay tuned. Okay, I've got one for you. What do you get if you put 15 grasshoppers on a track? Total hilarity. Total and utter hilarity. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll start first with a bit of an overview of the races. So the race is done in a style popularized by Team Chonmage. It's a deathmatch style format, so there are no marshals needed. If at any time during the race you become stuck or unable to move for whatever reason, then that's where you'll remain until the end of the race. Now, on a tight technical circuit like Carnosa RC Park, then it usually means as the race progressed, more and more cars become obstacles for you to navigate around later on. To make for even more excitement, red cones were temporarily fixed along the main straight. Hit one of those and you'd almost certainly flip over. Now, points are awarded depending on your finishing position, but the key thing here, you don't get any points if you don't finish the race. I think the rules do a superb job of making the race interesting, unpredictable, and above all, just fun. As the race begins, you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, what do? Do you push hard to claim victory and earn the points, but risk losing it all if you crash? Or do you take it easy and hopefully ensure that you'll finish the race and gain at least some points? Now, to be honest, I'm still a bit hazy on the points details myself, but as I understood it, you got extra points awarded if during qualifying you were promoted to the next level. To add another layer of excitement and to make it even more challenging, the starting grid for the next race would be the reverse of the finishing order. So win race 1, you start race 2 at the back of the pack. As for the buggies themselves, well, I wish I had gotten more footage of the pit area because I have never seen a greater mix of unusual, inspiring, unique and wonderfully creative grasshoppers. The level of modification of some of the entrants was jaw-dropping, absolutely jaw-dropping. From mildly tuned hoppers to lowriders to a Star Wars themed grasshopper, complete with C-3PO as a driver and R2-D2 for support. There was a Gundam inspired red hopper that really caught my eye. Now, most ran modified lower suspension arms at the front, borrowed from all kinds of makes and models including Associated and G-Force's Genova. Many were completely slammed to the ground with really wide tread at the front, achieved through the use of things like lunchbox front arms and basically using already available Tamiya plastic bushings to push those front wheels as far out as possible. For the rear, it wasn't unusual to see completely custom built multi-link rear suspension setups, all of which were still being powered by the hopper's simple friction dampers. The choice of wheels and tires was varied too. Many opted for large Blitz Beta wheels and rims, or those borrowed from, for example, the Comical series. I guess the thinking was to reduce the chance of being flipped over. However, others ran slim two-wheel drive fronts for quick steering response and agility through the corners. I guess overall, if I had to sum up the general approach to mods for the hopper class, it would be go as wide and as low as you can. Which is probably why the red, in Japanese we say ijime or bullying cones put on the straight caught so many drivers out. You know, their track and tread at the front and rear was just so wide they're way more likely to catch those cones and flip over. Now, the DT-02, the DT-03 chassis, while not being as highly modified as some of the Grasshoppers, were nevertheless highly customized in their own right. The green holiday buggy especially looks fabulous and really caught my eye. Closer inspection on some of them reveals a whole host of subtle mods, from stainless steel suspension pins, shock bracers, wheel hubs, turnbuckles, and so on. Now, along with the Grasshopper, a lot of effort went into cooling the motors, and that's something that I really didn't understand and appreciate until after the race. Despite using stock motors and gearing, the motor temps by the end of the race were on the high side, so I definitely need to look at cooling for my Grasshopper and my currently being built DT-02. Now, the majority of the entrants ran the newer DT-03 chassis, which proved to me that it can certainly take a beating, and despite some serious impacts, I didn't see anyone suffer notable breakages. Some of the buggies seemed very quick, which I suspect was the result of high voltage LiPo battery packs, weight reduction, lightweight gear components, and maybe even ceramic bearings. All of this was done to extract as much speed as possible from the stock 540 motors. Now, as a brief aside, seasoned racers were going to have to forgive me because I'm probably going to get a lot of the terminology wrong here. It's been many a year since I was last at a racer event. So the evening begins with free practice time. Before there are a series of qualifying races, and based on the results of those qualifying rounds, you get put into the A, B, or C main. Now, I am not sure how I managed it, but I somehow ended up in the A main. Which I was very chuffed with, because I honestly don't know how I managed it, but there we go. Now, with practice over, it was time for qualifying rounds to start. Now, the entrants were split into 3 groups of 5, and for qualifying, we ran 3 races of 3 laps each, back to back. Now, I was put into B group, and I would be racing against one of the fastest drivers at Carnosa RC Park. It was all very exciting, and I don't mind admitting I was quite nervous during my first race. I knew my hopper was probably one of the slow ones out there, with no modifications other than a couple of O-rings to the lower front, to lower the front ride height, and bigger wheels and tires at the rear. Now, my biggest drawback was that I opted to use my heavier and weaker NIM batteries, while it seemed everyone else was running LiPo. As I stood up on the driver's stand, my game plan was just to take my time and try not to crash. Ever since I've started racing and going to Carnosa regularly, I've just been working on improving consistency, trying to get around the track as smoothly as possible, and just taking my time and slowly getting faster. I've noticed, perhaps it's just me, but I've noticed my driving style differs somewhat to many others, particularly when it comes to things like throttle use, as I rarely pump the throttle trigger. I see a lot of drivers, repeatedly, it seems to be like they're going between neutral and max, full throttle, neutral, full throttle, neutral, pumping the throttle trigger, but I rarely do that. I opt for more smooth application of power. I guess it comes from me mostly driving on loose dirt, gravel, and grass, where the aggressive use of throttle just invariably leads to spin outs and lost traction. But, on a high traction carpet course, you can be much more abrupt in the application of power. Though that said, the hopper would wheelie if I wasn't careful. As a beginner on my first outing, I was placed at the front of the pack for my first race, which presented me with a bit of a problem. Would I have the acceleration needed to get around the first corner before everyone caught up with me, and along with them, the big chance of a pileup? Or should I just try and move out everyone's way right at the beginning? I opted to sprint for it. And on my first couple of races, I managed to stay ahead of the pack around the first corner. By the time I'd reached the tabletop, I was just trying to stay out of everyone's way, and it worked. I drove consistently, and dare I say it, even sedately, but I was adamant I was going to cross the finish line on my first race. Now, as luck would have it, many of the other drivers failed to finish or got held up on the track somewhere, and so despite my leisurely driving, I came in second. Great, I thought to myself, just keep doing this and it would be a case of the turtle beating the hare. As it worked for my first race, I decided to go for a similar tactic on my second, and to my surprise, I came in second again. So I was really pleased with myself at this point. On the third heat, unfortunately, I misjudged the bank at the far end. My rear wheel caught cone, and that was enough to send my hopper tumbling down and put an end to my race. After that, well, I had mixed results. Another mishap saw me retire early, but on the races where I crossed the finish line, my pace was way off from everyone else. Despite that though, I somehow found myself in the A main. I did my best, I pushed harder than I had prior, but the other drivers were just that much better, more skilled than me, and my tactic of relying on others to make a mistake and retire didn't work so well. So at the end of the evening, I came away with, what did I get? I was 12th out of 15, which, if I'm honest, was better than I was expecting, and I was well pleased with my result. But, you know, to me, winning wasn't the important part. I think I can speak for everyone when I say, win or lose, the event was an absolute joy, and I had so much fun and excitement during the evening. I can hardly describe the atmosphere of the circuit as we watched the buggies just rip around the course. Crashes were frequent. It was absolute mayhem, but in a good way. And not a moment went by without everyone just, you know, erupting into laughter as another buggy got stuck or something happened on the course. You just never knew what was going to happen. At one point, I drive across the finish line only to hit the barrier and flip over mere centimeters from the pit lane. I must add, in order to get points, you have to cross the finish line and enter the pit lane. So if you don't get in the pit lane, you don't get any points. To crash at that point must have been, such a frustration. Now, the Grasshopper Cup, or Batter Cup as it's known over here, is really gaining popularity, and many circuits are offering races based on Team Chonmage's rules. And after competing myself, it's really easy to see why. You don't need big budgets to enter, and the choice of the humble Grasshopper chassis, combined with some well thought out race rules and regulations, serve to reduce the barriers to entry. Anyone, and I do mean anyone, no matter what their budget, can put together a buggy and race and have a chance of winning. In fact, you could compete with a bone stock XB built series Grasshopper, and while yeah, of course it wouldn't be the fastest around the track, that wouldn't matter. Anything can and did happen on the track, so you never know, you could win. But win or not, you would just have so much fun just by participating. For me personally, I really do hope that the popularity of this race series continues to grow and reach new audiences, especially outside of Japan. I can't think of a better way of bringing more people, particularly youngsters, into the hobby and the joys of RC. You know, when I think back to the golden age of RC, I often wonder what made it golden. I mean, some could argue, it was all the radio control car releases from Tamiya, Kyosho and others. But to my mind, one of the things that made the golden era of RC golden was just the fact that everybody seemed to be doing RC. No matter where you went, you would find friends hanging around on street corners at local parks, circuits being set up everywhere. Everyone was getting into RC, and I think races like this that allow anybody to get into RC could help to bring about a second golden age of RC. That's the way I look at it. So, you know, the more people getting involved in this style of racing that's open to anybody, and anybody can come along and race whatever they've got and have a good time, I think it's a win-win for everybody. So in Japanese we say matome, or to sum up. I'm sure that some of you have probably come across Team Chonmage's videos on YouTube, perhaps even their Batter Race series videos, and I suspect for many of you it would have been quite a culture shock. But the idea for the race series is a fantastic one, as it makes the hobby accessible to everyone, regardless of budget. The well thought out rules and the choice of chassis mean that anyone has a chance of winning. A point illustrated perfectly by my own experience, as despite having an essentially stock Grasshopper powered by heavy NIM batteries and being very nervous at the time, I still managed to come in second in both of my first races. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this hobby is all about having fun, and the Grasshopper, despite its humble specifications, is capable of dishing out tons and tons of fun and enjoyment. Racing it along with fellow like-minded people just takes that fun to another level. It's a shame that we all still have to wear masks over here, because no one could see I had the biggest grin on my face the entire time. I also don't ever recall laughing so much while driving RC2. At the end of the night, as I packed away my gear, I just had two questions on my mind: a why and a when. The why? Why did I wait so long to visit the track? And the when? When is the next Grasshopper race?